They thought he was just another statistic. They thought no one was watching. On a humid Tuesday night in Chicago, Officer Brett Higgins made the biggest mistake of his career. He saw a man in a hoodie and saw a target, but he didn't check the ID. He didn't know that the man he was slamming against the hood of a squad car was Special Agent Darius Cole, a decorated federal operative deep undercover. For 9 agonizing minutes, a corrupt system tried to break an innocent man, but 9 minutes later, the hunter became the hunted. You are not going to believe who walked through that precinct door. The engine of the 2008 Chevy Impala ticked as it cooled, sitting in the shadows of an alleyway off West 4th Street. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and the metallic tang of adrenaline. Special Agent Darius Cole didn't look like a Fed. He didn't look like a hero. To the casual observer walking past the dimly lit alley in this forgotten slice of the city, he looked like trouble. He wore a faded charcoal hoodie, jeans that had seen better days, and a scuffed pair of Timberlands. A erratic beard covered a jawline that usually stayed clean-shaven for bureau photos. Darius checked his watch, 11:14 p.m. He wasn't here for a traffic violation. He was 3 months into Operation Iron Net, a sprawling RICO investigation targeting the distribution pipeline of the chaotic Kingsman syndicate. The FBI had intel that a high-level supplier, a ghost named Vargas, was meeting a contact at the dive bar across the street, the Rusty Anchor, at midnight. "Come on, Vargas," Darius whispered, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. He tapped the tiny audio receiver hidden in his center console. The wire he was wearing was live, feeding directly to a surveillance van parked 4 blocks away. But the van was silent. Radio silence was the protocol unless an officer was down. Darius was alone. This part of the city, under the jurisdiction of the notorious 9th Precinct, played by different rules. The locals called the 9th the meat grinder. It was a place where body cams frequently malfunctioned and suspects often tripped and fell down stairs while in custody. Darius knew the reputation. He'd read the files. But he wasn't worried about the cops tonight. He was worried about blowing his cover to the cartel. Suddenly, the alley was bathed in blinding blue and red light. Darius cursed under his breath. He didn't turn around. He knew exactly what it was. A patrol car had nosed into the alley, blocking his exit. He kept his hands on the steering wheel. Fingers spread. 10 and 2. Textbook. He lowered his window as the heavy footsteps crunched against the gravel. "Engine off! Keys on the dash! Now!" The voice was raspy, aggressive, and bored all at once. It was a voice used to giving orders that were obeyed out of fear, not respect. Darius complied slowly. He turned the key, the engine dying with a shudder. He placed the keys on the dashboard. "Good evening, officer," Darius said, his voice calm, pitched to a non-threatening register. "Is there a problem?" The beam of a maglite flashlight blinded him, dancing over his face, his clothes, and the empty passenger seat. "License and registration. Do not reach for them until I tell you." Darius squinted past the light. He could make out the nameplate on the uniform. B. Higgins. Officer Brett Bulldog Higgins. Darius's stomach tightened. He knew that name. Higgins was a legacy hire, a 15-year veteran of the force with more excessive force complaints than commendations. He was the kind of cop who considered the badge a hunting license. Behind Higgins stood a younger officer, female, looking nervous. Her hand hovered near her holster, but her eyes darted around the alleyway anxiously. Officer Alexander Miller, a rookie. "Officer Higgins," Darius said, keeping his eyes forward. "My wallet is in my back right pocket. My registration is in the glove box." "I didn't ask for your life story, pal. I asked for the ID." Higgins leaned in, his breath smelling of peppermint and tobacco. "What are you doing back here? This is a known drug area. You buying or selling?" "I'm waiting for a friend," Darius lied smoothly. "We're heading to the movies." "Movies? At 11:30 at night?" Higgins scoffed, finally lowering the flashlight so Darius could see the smirk on his face. Higgins was a large man, thick-necked and red-faced, with eyes that looked like cold marbles. "Get out of the car. Officer, with all due respect, I haven't committed a crime. I'm legally parked." "I smell marijuana," Higgins stated flatly. Darius's heart skipped a beat. He didn't smoke. The car was clean. It was the oldest trick in the book, the phantom odor that gave probable cause for a search. "There is no marijuana in this car, officer, and I don't consent to a search." Higgins's smile vanished. The air in the alleyway dropped 10 degrees. "Miller!" Higgins barked over his shoulder. "Suspect is being non-compliant. Cover me." "Officer, I am complying," Darius said, his voice hardening slightly. "I am informing you of my rights." "Your rights end where my safety begins," Higgins growled. He yanked the door open. "Out, now, or I drag you out." Darius knew he had a badge. It was tucked in a hidden Velcro pouch inside his left boot, but he couldn't reach for it. If he reached down, Higgins would shoot him. It was that simple, and if he declared he was a federal agent right here, loudly, he would blow 3 months of undercover work and potentially get his informants killed. He had to play the part. He had to be the victim. Darius unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the vehicle, raising his hands slowly. He towered over Higgins by 2 inches, a fact that seemed to irritate the officer instantly. "Turn around. Hands on the hood. Spread 'em." Darius turned, placing his palms on the cold metal of the Impala. He felt Higgins's hands rough patting him down, checking pockets, waistband, ankles. "Officer, really, check my ID. My name is Darius Cole. I work for—" "Shut up!" Higgins slammed Darius's face down onto the hood. "Hey!" Darius shouted, the metal biting into his cheek. "That is unnecessary force." "Resisting arrest!" Higgins shouted for the benefit of the body cam he hadn't turned on yet. "Stop resisting! Stop reaching for my weapon!" "I am not moving," Darius yelled back, panic starting to mix with his anger. "I am standing still." "Miller, cuff him." The rookie rushed forward, her hands shaking as she pulled Darius's wrists behind his back. The steel cuffs clicked tight, too tight. They pinched the ulnar nerve, sending a shock of pain up Darius's arm. "You're making a mistake," Darius hissed through gritted teeth. "The only mistake was you coming into my town, boy," Higgins whispered in his ear. "Officer Miller, search the car," Higgins ordered, spinning Darius around and shoving him toward the patrol unit. "Sarge, maybe we should just run his ID first," Miller suggested tentatively. He doesn't seem high." "Do I pay you to think, Miller? I pay you to learn," Higgins snapped. "Toss the car. Find the weed. If you can't find it, look harder." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Look harder. Find something that isn't there. Darius was shoved into the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat was unforgiving. The cage separated him from the front, but the glass was thin enough to hear. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha." Higgins keyed the radio on his shoulder. "One male in custody. Resisting. Possible possession with intent. We're tossing the vehicle now." Darius sat in the dark, his mind racing. He needed to signal the surveillance van. His wire was still on his chest, but the receiver in the car was out of range of his voice now. He hoped to God Agent Strickland in the van was awake and seeing the GPS dot on the Impala not moving. Through the window, Darius watched Higgins leaning into the Impala. He wasn't searching, he was planting. Darius saw the motion clearly, a quick dip of the hand into his own vest pocket, then a movement under the driver's seat. Darius closed his eyes. Heroin. Or crack. Higgins was planting a felony amount. This wasn't just a harassment stop anymore. This was a career ender. A life ender. If Darius was booked on felony possession, even if he cleared it up later with the Bureau, the mugshot would be public. Vargas would see it. The cartel would know he was either a criminal or a cop who got burned. His cover would be incinerated. He had to play his ace. Higgins walked back to the cruiser, a smirk plastered on his face. He opened the driver's side door and slid in. Miller got in the passenger side, looking pale. She held a small clear baggie filled with white powder. "Look what we found under your seat, Mr. Cole," Higgins said, holding the baggie up to the rearview mirror so Darius could see it. "That's a lot of blow for a movie night." "That's not mine," Darius said, his voice deadly calm. "And you know it. Save it for the judge." Higgins started the engine. "Officer Higgins," Darius said, leaning forward as much as the cuffs allowed. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. My name is Special Agent Darius Cole, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Badge number 8944. I'm currently active in an undercover operation. If you drive this car 1 inch, you are interfering with a federal investigation." Silence filled the car. Miller turned around so fast her neck popped. Her eyes were wide. "Sarge?" Higgins didn't blink. He stared at Darius in the rearview mirror. For a second, Darius thought he saw fear, but it was quickly replaced by arrogance. "FBI?" Higgins let out a short, barking laugh. "Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. I've heard every lie in the book, junkie, but impersonating a federal officer, that's another felony to add to the list." "Check my wallet," Darius urged. "There is a second ID behind the license, or call the Chicago field office. Ask for Assistant Director Garrison." "I'm not calling anyone," Higgins said, putting the car in drive. "You think you're smart? You think you can scare me? You're going to the cage, and you're going to rot." "Miller," Darius shifted his gaze to the rookie. "Officer Miller, you took an oath. You saw him plant that. Check my boot, left boot. There is a Velcro pouch." Miller looked at Higgins. "Sarge, maybe we should check, just to be sure." "Don't you dare touch him," Higgins warned her, his voice low and dangerous. "He's trying to manipulate you. He's a criminal. He lies. That's what they do." Higgins floored the accelerator. The cruiser lurched forward, leaving the alleyway and the safety of the truth behind. The drive to the 9th precinct took 9 minutes. For Darius, it felt like 9 years. Every second that ticked by was a second closer to permanent disaster. He ran the scenarios. If he was booked, his fingerprints would hit the system. The FBI flags would pop up, yes, but by then the booking officer, the desk sergeant, and anyone in the lobby would see him. The record would be created. He needed to stop this before he was processed. "You're making a mistake that you can't undo, Higgins," Darius said from the back. "Shut up," Higgins said, turning up the radio. Rock music blasted, drowning out Darius's voice. Darius leaned his head back against the cage. He focused on his breathing. He had to remain calm. He had to be the professional. In the front seat, the dynamic was shifting. Officer Miller was silent, staring out the window. She was gripping the door handle tightly. She had seen the baggie. She knew she hadn't found it. She had searched that side of the car. She knew Higgins had pulled it from nowhere. "Sarge," Miller said, her voice barely audible over the music. "What?" Higgins shouted. If he is a Fed." Higgins slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "He is not a Fed, Alexander. Look at him. Does he look like the FBI to you? He's a street thug. He's trash. We are taking out the trash. That is the job." "But he knew the assistant director's name," Miller pressed. "Everyone knows Garrison's name. It's on the news." Higgins scoffed. "Relax. You'll get a commendation for this bust. High-level dealer, taking weight off the streets. You're welcome." They pulled into the precinct sallyport. The heavy steel garage doors rolled down behind them, sealing them inside the concrete belly of the station. Darius felt the car stop. The music died. Higgins got out, adjusting his belt. He opened the back door and grabbed Darius by the arm, hauling him out with unnecessary force. "Welcome to the Hilton," Higgins sneered. Darius stumbled, but caught his footing. He stood tall, looking Higgins dead in the eye. "Last chance, Higgins. Call it in. Verify my status. Get moving." Higgins shoved him toward the steel door leading to booking. As they walked through the hallway, the smell of industrial cleaner and sweat hit them. They passed a few other officers who nodded at Higgins. "Got a live one, Bulldog?" one asked. "Big fish," Higgins bragged. "Resisting, assaulting an officer, possession with intent, impersonating a Fed." The other cops laughed. "A Fed? That's a new one." They reached the booking desk. The desk sergeant, a weary-looking man named O'Malley with greying hair and reading glasses, looked up from his computer. "What you got, Brett?" O'Malley asked, rubbing his eyes. "Male, no ID on person. Says he's FBI." Higgins chuckled, tossing the baggie of white powder onto the high counter. "Found this under his seat." O'Malley looked at the drugs, then at Darius. He squinted. "Name?" O'Malley asked Darius. "Special Agent Darius Cole. Badge 8944. Check the system, Sergeant. Do it now." The authority in Darius's voice made O'Malley pause. It wasn't the screaming of a drunk or the desperate pleading of a dealer. It was the command tone of someone who gave orders. O'Malley's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Don't waste your time, O'Malley," Higgins said, leaning on the counter. "Just book him as John Doe for now. We'll print him." "Type the name," Darius said, his eyes locking onto O'Malley. "Darius Cole, C-O-L-E." O'Malley looked at Higgins, then back at Darius. He typed the name. He hit enter. A second passed, then another. Suddenly, a red alert box flashed on O'Malley's screen. A silent alarm triggered on his terminal. O'Malley's face went pale. He looked at the screen, read the text, and his mouth fell open. Subject: Cole, Darius, status, active federal agent / level 5 clearance, warning, undercover operative, do not process, contact SSC Strickland immediately. O'Malley swallowed hard. He looked up at Higgins, his eyes wide with genuine panic. "Brett," O'Malley whispered. "What? Printer jammed?" Higgins joked. "Brett, you need to uncuff him," O'Malley said, his voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" Higgins frowned. "Uncuff him, right, now." O'Malley stood up, his hand instinctively moving toward the phone on his desk, the red phone that connected directly to downtown. "He's real, Brett. Oh God, he's actually a Fed." Higgins froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure. The smirk evaporated. Darius stood there, the cuffs still biting into his wrists, and watched the realization crash over Higgins like a tidal wave. "That's impossible," Higgins stammered. I found the drugs." "You planted the drugs," Darius corrected, his voice echoing in the silent booking room. "And you did it while I was recording." Higgins's eyes darted to Darius's chest. "Miller," Darius said, turning to the rookie who was standing by the door, looking like she was about to be sick. "Take these cuffs off me." Miller didn't hesitate this time. She rushed forward, fumbling with her keys. She unlocked the cuffs. Darius rubbed his wrists. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just reached into his boot, ripped the Velcro, and pulled out his gold shield. He slammed it onto the counter next to the bag of baking soda Higgins had planted. "Sergeant O'Malley," Darius said, his voice ice cold. "Lock down this building. No one leaves, especially not him." He pointed a finger at Higgins. Higgins took a step back, his hand twitching toward his gun. "Don't even think about it," a booming voice came from the precinct entrance. The double doors burst open. The double doors of the precinct didn't just open. They were kicked in with a force that rattled the bulletproof glass of the reception partition. 6 men in heavy tactical gear stormed the lobby. Emblazoned in bold yellow letters across their navy blue windbreakers was the acronym that stopped hearts, FBI. Leading the charge was Special Agent in Charge, SAC, Robert Strickland. He was a man carved out of granite, a 20-year veteran of the Bureau who had hunted terrorists and mob bosses alike. Tonight, he looked angrier than Darius had ever seen him. "Federal agents," Strickland bellowed, his voice filling the cavernous lobby. "Nobody move! Hands where I can see them! Now!" The reaction in the 9th precinct was chaotic. Officers who were drinking coffee, filling out paperwork, or chatting by the water cooler froze. Hands instinctively went to holsters, a dangerous reflex in a room suddenly filled with AR-15s pointed at their chests. "Drop your weapons!" an FBI tactical operator shouted. "Do it! Do it now!" Benet Sergeant O'Malley, still behind the desk, raised his hands high in the air, stepping away from the silent alarm button he had already pressed. "Don't shoot! We're friendly! We're friendly!" Officer Brett Higgins stood frozen near the booking counter. His hand was still hovering near his Glock. He looked from Darius, who was massaging his bruised wrists, to the tactical team swarming the room. The color had not returned to his face. He looked like a man waking up in a nightmare. "Higgins!" Strickland barked, spotting the badge nameplate. "Touch that weapon, and it'll be the last thing you ever do. Hands on your head. Interlace your fingers. Get on your knees." Higgins hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was the hesitation of a bully who had never been punched back. He looked at his fellow officers, silently begging for backup. But the blue wall of silence was crumbling under the weight of federal jurisdiction. No one moved to help him. The other cops saw the writing on the wall. They saw the badge Darius had slammed on the counter. They knew this was a losing battle. Slowly, defeatedly, Higgins sank to his knees on the dirty linoleum floor. Strickland holstered his weapon and marched over to Darius. He did a quick visual scan of his agent. "You hurt?" Strickland asked, his voice low but intense. "Just my pride and some nerve damage in the wrist," Darius replied, flexing his fingers. He pinched the ulnar, deliberate. Strickland's jaw tightened. He turned his gaze to Higgins. "You have the right to remain silent," Strickland began, reciting the Miranda warning with a venomous cadence. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the tactical team secured the lobby, a door at the back of the station swung open. Lieutenant Bain, the watch commander, stormed out. Bain was a relic of the old Chicago PD, thick mustache, suspenders, and an attitude that said he owned the block. "What the hell is going on in my house?" Bain shouted, his face purple with rage. "Who are you people? You can't come in here waving guns around. This is a Chicago police precinct." Strickland stepped forward, meeting Bain in the center of the room. The height difference was negligible, but the difference in authority was massive. "I'm Special Agent in charge, Strickland. This is no longer your house, Lieutenant. This is a crime scene." "Crime scene?" Bain sputtered. "What crime?" "We brought in a suspect for possession." Strickland pointed at Darius. "That suspect is a federal agent working an active RICO case. Your officer just kidnapped him, assaulted him, and attempted to frame him with narcotics." Bain looked at Darius, then at Higgins kneeling on the floor. His eyes narrowed. He was calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to cover it up. "It's a misunderstanding," Bain said, his voice dropping to a conciliatory tone. "My officer made a mistake. If the guy is a Fed, he didn't identify himself properly. We can work this out. Let's go to my office, have a coffee and—" "There is no coffee," Darius interrupted, stepping forward. He picked up the baggie of white powder from the counter, the evidence Higgins had planted. "This is getting bagged as evidence against your officer, Lieutenant, and we're not going to your office. We're taking your servers. We're taking the body cam footage. We're taking the dash cam data. And we are taking Officer Higgins into federal custody." "You can't do that," Bain yelled. "I have jurisdiction here." "Not anymore," Strickland said, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. He slapped it against Bain's chest. "Federal warrant, signed by Judge Abernathy 10 minutes ago. We have probable cause to believe that officers in the 9th Precinct are conspiring to obstruct justice and violate civil rights under Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code. We own this building until we say otherwise." Bain stared at the warrant. He looked deflated. The fight went out of him. Strickland turned to his team. "Secure the evidence room. Secure the server room. Nobody touches a computer. Nobody shreds a document. If I see a paper shredder turn on, I'm arresting the person feeding it. 2 FBI agents grabbed Higgins by the arms and hauled him up. They swapped his standard-issue cuffs for heavy federal restraints. "Miller!" Darius called out. The room went quiet. Officer Alexander Miller was standing in the corner, shaking. She looked terrified. "Don't say a word, Miller!" Higgins shouted as he was dragged away. "Union rep! Demand a rep!" Darius ignored him and walked up to Miller. She flinched as he approached. "Officer Miller," Darius said softly, "you have a choice right now. A very small window of opportunity. You can be a defendant, or you can be a witness." Miller looked at Lieutenant Bain, who was glaring at her, silently ordering her to shut up. Then she looked at Darius. She saw the bruising on his cheek where Higgins had slammed him. She remembered the baggie appearing from nowhere. Miller's voice cracked. "I don't want to go to jail." "Then tell the truth," Darius said. "Did you see him find the drugs?" Miller took a deep breath. She closed her eyes, tears squeezing out. "No," she whispered. He had it in his vest. I saw him take it out of his vest before he reached under the seat." "Liar!" Bain shouted. "She's a rookie. She doesn't know what she saw." "Get her statement recorded immediately," Strickland ordered an agent. "She's under federal protection now." Darius watched as Miller was led away to a quiet room. The first brick had fallen, but as Darius looked around the station, at the sullen faces of the other officers, at the nervous sweat on Lieutenant Bain's forehead, he realized something. Higgins wasn't just a bad apple. He was too comfortable. He was too arrogant. He acted like he had insurance. Darius walked over to the desk where O'Malley sat. He leaned in close. "The radio," Darius said. "Pull the logs." "What logs?" O'Malley asked, nervous. "When Higgins stopped me, he called dispatch. Who answered?" O'Malley tapped the keys. "Dispatch. Looks like Central." "No," Darius said. "He didn't talk to Central. He keyed a secondary channel. I heard the click. It was a direct line." O'Malley frowned. He dug deeper into the comms log. "You're right. He keyed channel 4. That's a tactical channel, usually reserved for SWAT or private comms." "Play it," Darius commanded. O'Malley hesitated, then clicked play. The audio was grainy, but distinct. "Higgins. Target acquired. Alley off 4th. It's the buyer. I'm taking him off the board." Voice on radio. "Clean?" Higgins. "Dirty. Planting the package now. He won't make the meat." Voice on radio. "Good. Bring him to the house. We'll handle the rest. The Kingsmen send their regards." Darius felt a chill run down his spine. The station went deadly silent. Even Strickland stopped issuing orders to listen. "That wasn't a police dispatcher," Strickland said, his face hardening into stone. "No," Darius said, staring at the speaker. "That was the cartel. This wasn't just police brutality. Higgins wasn't just trying to arrest a black man in the wrong neighborhood. Higgins was an enforcer for the Kingsman Syndicate. He had intercepted Darius not because he was profiling him, but because the cartel knew Darius was coming to meet Vargas. The 9th Precinct wasn't just corrupt, it was compromised. "Lock the doors," Darius said, his voice ringing with finality. "Nobody leaves. We have a mole, and I think I know who it is." The precinct had been transformed into a makeshift command center. The blinds were drawn. FBI technicians were scrubbing the hard drives. The local cops had been herded into the break room, stripped of their weapons, and were being guarded by 2 agents with MP5s. Darius sat in the interrogation room Interrogation Room 1, the same room Higgins had intended to throw him in. But now, Darius was on the freedom side of the table, and Higgins was shackled to the chair. Higgins looked smaller without his uniform shirt. The FBI had stripped him down to his undershirt to search for additional wires or contraband. He sat slumped, staring at the steel table. "You're in a lot of trouble, Brett," Darius said, sliding a cup of water across the table. He didn't offer coffee. Higgins didn't drink. I want my lawyer. I want the FOP representative. You'll get them, Darius said, sitting down. But your lawyer can't help you with what we just found on the radio logs. Higgins flinched. A microscopic reaction, but Darius caught it. We heard the call, Brett. The Kingsmen send their regards. Oh, that's what your handler said. I don't know what you're talking about, Higgins mumbled. Radio interference. Don't insult my intelligence, Darius leaned in. We know you're on the payroll, but here's the thing. The Kingsmen don't like loose ends. You failed. You were supposed to take me off the board so I couldn't meet Vargas. Instead, you brought the entire FBI down on their heads. Darius let that sink in. When Vargas finds out you led us here, when he finds out you're in custody, do you think he's going to send a lawyer? Or is he going to send a cleaner? Higgins looked up. The fear in his eyes was genuine now. It wasn't the fear of losing his job. It was the fear of losing his life. You can't protect me, Higgins whispered. They have eyes everywhere, even in jail. Especially in jail. I can protect you, Darius lied, or half lied. I can put you in witness protection. New name, new life, someplace sunny, Arizona maybe, but you have to give me the voice on the radio. Who is the handler? Higgins shook his head. If I talk, my family is dead. If you don't talk, you are dead, and your family is left with the legacy of a dirty cop. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room opened. Strickland poked his head in. Darius, you need to see this. Darius stepped out into the hallway. Strickland held up a tablet. We traced the frequency from the radio call, Strickland said grimly. It didn't bounce off a cell tower. It was a short-range transmission. Short range? Darius frowned. How short? Inside the building, Strickland said. The handler is in the precinct. Darius felt the blood rush to his head. It's inside the house. We're triangulating the signal source now, Strickland continued. It came from the southeast corner office on the second floor. Darius visualized the layout of the station. The southeast corner. That's the captain's office. Captain James Thorne, the precinct commander. A man who was currently on vacation in Florida, according to the duty roster. Thorne is supposed to be away, Darius said. Well, someone is in his office using his encrypted radio, Strickland said. Let's go. Darius and Strickland, flanked by 4 tactical agents, moved silently up the stairs. The station was eerie, the usual bustle of police work replaced by the tense silence of a federal raid. They reached the second-floor landing. The hallway was empty. At the end of the hall, the frosted glass door of the captain's office was dark. Darius drew his service weapon, a Glock 19 he had retrieved from his impounded personal effects. He stacked up on the left side of the door. Strickland took the right. Strickland nodded. 3, 2, 1. Strickland tried the handle. Locked. He signaled the breacher. A specialized agent stepped forward with a battering ram. With one swing, the lock shattered. The door flew open. Federal agents! The room was dark, illuminated only by the glow of a computer monitor and the streetlights filtering through the blinds. Sitting in the captain's high-backed leather chair was not Captain Thorne. It was Lieutenant Bain, the watch commander who had been screaming about jurisdiction downstairs only 20 minutes ago. He had slipped away during the confusion of the initial raid. Bain was holding a radio in one hand and a shredded pile of documents in the other. A lighter was flicking in his shaking hand, trying to ignite the paper. "Drop it!" Darius shouted, aiming his weapon at Bain's chest. Bain froze. He looked at the lighter, then at the agents. He smiled a sad, pathetic smile. "It's too late," Bain said. "He knows." "Who knows?" Darius demanded, stepping into the room. "Vargas. I just warned him. He's gone. You'll never find him." Bain dropped the lighter. The papers, ledgers, by the look of them, caught fire instantly. Strickland rushed forward, knocking Bain out of the chair and stomping on the flames. "Get the fire extinguisher. Secure him." Darius grabbed Bain by the collar, hauling him up. You sold out your own badge. For what? Money? Bain laughed, a wheezing sound. Money? No, son. Survival. You don't say no to the Kingsmen. You play ball or they visit your house while your kids are sleeping. Higgins was just a pawn. I'm just a pawn. Who is the king? Darius asked. You're standing in his city, Bain spat. And you just started a war. The fire was out, but the ledgers were half destroyed. The tactical team cuffed Bain. Darius, Strickland called out from the captain's desk. He was looking at the computer screen Bain had been using. You need to look at this. Darius walked over. On the screen was a live surveillance feed. It wasn't showing a street corner or a bank lobby. It was showing the interior of the Rusty Anchor, the dive bar across the street where Darius was supposed to meet his contact. They have cameras in the meeting spot, Darius realized. They were watching for me. Look closer, Strickland pointed. In the grainy black and white footage, a man was sitting in the back booth. He was checking his watch. It was Vargas. He's not gone, Darius whispered. He's still there. Bain lied. He didn't warn him. Bain, currently being dragged out the door, shouted back, I tried. He didn't answer. He's waiting for you. Darius looked at the time. 11:58 p.m. The meet was scheduled for midnight. He's waiting for the buyer, Darius said, his mind racing. He doesn't know the bust went down. He doesn't know Higgins failed. He thinks I'm just late. Strickland looked at Darius. No, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. We have the precinct locked down, but we don't have eyes on the bar. It could be an ambush. If we don't go now, we lose Vargas, Darius argued. He's the key to the whole Midwest distribution. If he walks out that door, he disappears forever. Bain said he tried to warn him, but he didn't answer. That means we have a window. Darius, you've been assaulted, cuffed, and identified as a Fed in this building. If anyone in that bar has a scanner. Bain was using an encrypted channel, Darius countered. The street guys don't know yet. I can still make the play. Strickland looked at the screen, then at Darius. He saw the determination in the agent's eyes. You have 5 minutes, Strickland said. I'll have snipers on the roof of the station in 3. I'll have a team at the back door, but inside? You're on your own. Darius checked his gun. He adjusted his hoodie. He looked in the reflection of the monitor. The bruises on his face were forming, dark and angry. Perfect, Darius said, touching his swollen cheek. I look like I just got into a fight with a cop and got away. That's exactly the story I need. Go, Strickland said. And Darius? Don't get dead. Darius ran out of the office, down the stairs and toward the back exit of the precinct. He was going back into the shadows, but this time the hunter was awake. The night air felt different now, sharper, colder. Darius Cole crossed the street, keeping his head down, his gait uneven. He didn't have to pretend to be hurt. His wrist throbbed with a dull, sickening ache, and the side of his face felt like it was on fire. The Rusty Anchor was a relic of a dying neighborhood. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. The windows were painted black. It was the kind of place where people went to hide, not to be seen. Darius pushed the heavy door open. The smell hit him first, stale beer, bleach, and something metallic. The jukebox was silent. The bartender, a man with a road map of scars on his forearms, looked up, wiped a glass with a dirty rag, and looked back down. He knew better than to stare. There were only 3 other people in the bar. They were sitting in the circular booth at the far back, shrouded in shadow. 2 of them were muscle, Kingsmen soldiers, wearing leather jackets that barely concealed the bulges of shoulder holsters. Between them sat Julian Vargas. Vargas was smaller than the legends described. He wore a sharp grey suit that cost more than the building they were sitting in. He was sipping a glass of mineral water. He looked like an accountant, but Darius knew better. This was the man who had turned the Midwest drug trade into a paramilitary operation. Darius walked toward the booth. Every step echoed on the sticky floor. One of the soldiers stood up, hand moving to his chest. "Sit down, Rico," Vargas said softly, his voice smooth and cultured. "Our guest is finally here." Darius stopped at the edge of the table. He didn't apologize for being late. Apologies were a sign of weakness in this world. "Rough night?" Vargas asked, gesturing to the empty seat opposite him. Darius slid into the booth. He leaned forward into the light, letting Vargas see the fresh purple bruising on his cheekbone and the cut on his lip. "The 9th Precinct has a heavy welcoming committee." Darius grunted, his voice raspy. Vargas chuckled, a dry sound. "Ah, the bulldogs. They are aggressive, yes, but they are useful. They keep the competition away." "They almost kept me away," Darius lied, spinning the narrative. "Cop named Higgins pulled me over, tried to plant a felony amount on me. I had to ditch the car and run through the rail yard." Vargas's eyes narrowed. He studied Darius's face, looking for the lie. This was the moment. If Vargas sensed fear, if he sensed the deception, Darius would die in this booth. "You ran from the police?" Vargas asked. "And yet, you are here. Risky." "Business comes first," Darius said, locking eyes with the kingpin. "And I don't get paid if I don't make the meat. Besides, those cops couldn't catch a cold. They're too busy counting the money you pay them." Vargas smiled. It was a genuine smile. He appreciated the insult to the police. It validated his power over them. "True," Vargas agreed. "They are expensive pets, but necessary." Darius tapped the table. "I don't have all night, Vargas. The heat is on out there. Do we have a deal or not? 50 kilos, pure. My transport is waiting 3 blocks east." Vargas nodded to Rico. The bodyguard reached under the table and pulled out a black duffel bag. He unzipped it just enough to reveal the vacuum-sealed bricks. "The product is here," Vargas said, "but the price has changed." "We agreed on a price," Darius said, feigning anger. "That was before you brought the heat to my doorstep," Vargas replied coolly. "Hazard pay, 10% on top." Darius clenched his jaw. He had to look angry, but internally he was cheering. Hazard pay. That was an admission of illicit business. Combined with the drugs on the table, it was enough to put Vargas away for life. "Fine," Darius spat. 10%. But this is the last time. Next time, tell your dogs in blue to stay on the porch." "Agreed," Vargas said. He reached out a hand. "To partnership." Darius hesitated. He looked at the hand that had ordered hits, ruined lives, and corrupted an entire police precinct. Darius reached into his hoodie pocket, but he didn't pull out cash. He pulled out a folded napkin from the bar. He placed it on the table. "One more thing," Darius said. "What is this?" Vargas asked, frowning. "That," Darius said, his voice dropping the street accent and returning to the crisp, authoritative tone of a federal agent, "is the signal." Crash. The skylight above the pool table shattered as a flashbang grenade dropped into the room. The folded napkin hit the table with the softness of a feather, but in the silence of the bar, it might as well have been a gavel striking a sounding block. Vargas stared at it. The white paper stood out starkly against the dark wood, a simple, innocuous object that felt terrifyingly out of place. He looked up, his brow furrowing as he tried to decode the gesture. He looked at Darius, and for the first time, the kingpin saw past the hoodie, past the bruise, and past the street facade. He saw the cold, predatory intelligence of a hunter who had just snapped the trap shut. "What is this?" Vargas whispered, his hand inching toward the table's edge. "That," Darius said, his voice dropping an octave, shedding the raspy street dialect for the crisp, commanding tone of federal authority, "is the end of your reign." Darius didn't blink. "And it's the signal." Vargas's eyes widened. He opened his mouth to scream a command to his guards, but the sound never left his throat. Crash. The skylight above the pool table didn't just break, it disintegrated. A canister the size of a soda can dropped into the center of the room, spinning on the floorboards. Bang! The flashbang grenade detonated with a concussive force that sucked the air out of the room. A blinding white light, brighter than the sun, seared the retinas of everyone facing it, accompanied by a deafening, chest-thumping boom that shattered the liquor bottles behind the bar. FBI! Federal agents! Get down! Get down! The roar of the breach team was a physical force. The front door was rammed off its hinges, splintering inward. The back door flew open with a metallic clang. From every entrance, armored figures in olive-drab tactical gear poured in like a flood, the beams of their weapon lights cutting through the lingering smoke like lasers. Darius, who had squeezed his eyes shut and covered his ears a split second before the blast, moved while Vargas was still reeling. He launched himself across the booth, scattering the glasses and the duffel bag. He tackled Vargas, driving his shoulder into the kingpin's chest and slamming him into the padded leather of the seat. Vargas was disoriented, but he was fighting for his life. He clawed at Darius's face, his fingernails digging into the fresh bruise on Darius's cheek. He screamed in Spanish, a primal sound of rage and panic, reaching for the gold-plated Desert Eagle tucked into his waistband. "Don't do it!" Darius roared, jamming his forearm against Vargas's throat. "Give it up, Vargas! It's over!" Vargas managed to grip the handle of his gun, but before he could draw it, a heavy boot slammed onto his wrist. Agent Strickland stood over the booth, his AR-15 trained on Vargas's head. "Let go of the weapon," Strickland commanded, his voice deadly calm amidst the chaos. "Or you die in this booth." Vargas froze. He looked at the barrel of the rifle, then at Darius, who was pinning him down with the weight of absolute justice. Slowly, Vargas released the gun. "Clear left. Clear right. Subject 2 secured. Subject 3 secured." The shouts of the tactical team echoed through the bar. The two bodyguards, Rico and the other muscle, were already on the floor, zip-tied and groaning, having been neutralized by non-lethal beanbag rounds during the initial breach. Darius hauled Vargas out of the booth and spun him around. He kicked the kingpin's legs apart and slammed him against the wall. "Julian Vargas," Darius panted, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "You are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and the corruption of a public official under RICO statutes." Darius grabbed his own handcuffs, his federal-issue steel cuffs, and slapped them onto Vargas's wrists. The click was the most satisfying sound Darius had heard all night. It was the sound of 3 months of undercover work, fear and near-death experiences finally paying off. "You have the right to remain silent," Darius recited, spinning Vargas around to face him. "And I suggest you use it, because every word you said tonight, about the hazard pay, about the cops being your expensive pets, we have it all in high definition." Vargas looked around the room. His empire had crumbled in less than 60 seconds. The drugs were being bagged, his men were in custody, and the man he thought was a desperate buyer was standing tall, adjusting a badge that hung around his neck. "You played the part well," Vargas spat, blood trickling from his nose. "But you can't kill the Kingsman. We have roots deep in this city." "We're not just pulling up the weeds, Vargas," Strickland said, stepping forward. "Tonight, we're burning the whole garden. Get him out of here." 2 agents grabbed Vargas and marched him toward the door. Darius leaned against the bar, taking a deep breath. His body ached. His wrist was throbbing where Higgins had cuffed him earlier, and his face felt like it had gone 10 rounds with a boxer. But he felt light. "You okay?" Strickland asked, lowering his weapon. "I need an ice pack and a week off," Darius quipped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But yeah, I'm good." "You did good, Darius," Strickland said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Now come on, there's one more loose end we need to tie up. You're going to want to see this." Darius followed Strickland out of the suffocating, stale air of the rusty anchor and into the night. The scene outside was apocalyptic. The entire block had been cordoned off. The flashing red and blue lights of 50 different law enforcement vehicles painted the brick buildings in a strobing, surreal disco of authority. But it wasn't just the FBI. The state police were there, the DEA was there, and directly across the street, the 9th Precinct was being purged. It was a spectacle that would be on the morning news across the country. Federal agents were carrying boxes of files, computers, and servers out of the station. The blue wall hadn't just been breached. It had been demolished. Darius stood on the curb, the cool wind hitting his face. He watched as a line of men in handcuffs were led out of the precinct's main doors. First came Lieutenant Bain. The bluster and arrogance were gone. He walked with his head down, trying to hide his face from the cameras, looking every bit the small, greedy man he truly was. Then came the sergeants, the desk officers who had looked the other way. And then, finally, came the man of the hour, Officer Brett Higgins. Higgins wasn't hiding. He was looking around frantically, his eyes darting from the agents to the cameras, searching for a lifeline. He looked like a man waking up in a nightmare he couldn't control. He was stripped of his belt, his badge, and his gun. He wore only his uniform trousers and the undershirt Darius had seen him in earlier. As the agents led him toward the transport van, Higgins looked across the street. His eyes locked onto Darius. Time seemed to slow down. The noise of the sirens, the shouting of the press, the crackle of radios, it all faded into the background. Higgins stopped. The agents pushed him, but he resisted for a second, staring at the man he had thrown against the hood of a car 3 hours ago. The man he had called boy, the man he had tried to frame. Darius didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply stepped forward into the pool of light from a street lamp. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his gold shield, the Federal Bureau of Investigation badge that Higgins had refused to believe existed. Darius held it up, letting the light catch the polished brass. Then, slowly, deliberately, Darius tapped the badge 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The message was clear. I told you. You should have checked the ID. Higgins's face crumpled. The color drained away, leaving him looking grey and sickly. His shoulders slumped as the realization of his future hit him with the force of a physical blow. There would be no bail. There would be no union protection. He was going to federal prison, a place where ex-cops, especially dirty ones, had a life expectancy measured in days, not years. He had tried to destroy Darius to protect a cartel. Now, the cartel was gone. His career was over, and his freedom was a memory. The agents shoved Higgins forward, and he stumbled into the back of the armored van, the heavy doors slamming shut on his life as a free man. That, Strickland said, standing beside Darius, is what I call a clean sweep. A mob of reporters, sensing the main character of the drama, broke through the police line and rushed toward Darius. Microphones were shoved in his face. Agent, can you tell us what happened? Is it true the 9th Precinct was working for the cartel? How deep does the corruption go? Darius looked at the cameras. He looked at the precinct, a building that was supposed to be a sanctuary, now a crime scene. Tonight, Darius said, his voice steady and projecting clearly over the noise, we sent a message. The badge is a promise to the community. It stands for protection, integrity, and justice. When you use it to oppress the people you swore to serve, you don't just lose the badge. Darius looked at the van driving Higgins away. You lose your freedom. Nobody is above the law, not the Kingsmen, and certainly not the people hiding behind a uniform. Darius turned his back on the cameras and walked toward the command vehicle. The night was over. The job was done, and for the first time in a long time, the streets felt a little bit cleaner. And that is the incredible true story of how one corrupt officer's ego brought down an entire criminal empire. Brett Higgins thought he was hunting a victim. Instead, he caught a wolf in sheep's clothing. In the months that followed, the fallout was massive. Lieutenant Bain and Brett Higgins were both sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The The 9th Precinct was completely dissolved and reorganized under new leadership. Julian Vargas. He turned state's evidence to avoid the death penalty, dismantling the Kingsmen syndicate for good. It just goes to show, karma doesn't always come instantly, but when it does, it hits hard. Higgins had 9 minutes to do the right thing. He chose wrong, and he paid the ultimate price. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor, smash that like button. It tells YouTube you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a shocking twist. What do you think? Did Higgins get what he deserved, or was the sentence too light? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.